excited for us to be here today. You have me, you have Alexis. So, Dr. Alexis Romeu. Um, no, Romeu.
Romeu, but yeah.
Romeu. Okay. Sorry, Dr. Alexis. And to me, Alexis,
Mhm.
my dear friend since late 2017 and mentor off and on since not long after that, 2019, I
Yeah, I
think.
think so.
And she's been on the podcast multiple times. But if this is your first time meeting her, Alexis is a doctor of Chinese medicine in her past life, but current life, right? Like you used to be more in Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and then it kind of evolved into Alexis is now a metaphysical teacher. She is the channel of with a being named Simon, who we're going to talk about more today, an energy healing modality that I'm a practitioner for now as well. I'm one of her practitioners, and it's called the expansion principle energy healing technology. And she's also an author. So I just have to brag on you because you're my friend and I adore you. So
You're so sweet.
yes, I have both of her books. So this is Alexis's first book. If you're watching this on video, you can see it's the expansion principle. Gives you a great background and foundational understanding of how EP expansion principle came to be in your life and then how you began to share it. I'm one of 40 something practitioners.
Yeah, I think we're almost at 50 now, if not a little over. Yep.
So exciting. And just within the last couple weeks, her new book, The Art of Sacred Relating, which you can see my bookmark. I've made it about
I
a
love
third of the way through. And then our house got hit with a stomach bug. So as soon as I have my brain capacity back, I'm loving it as well because Alexis is just such a special person to know. And I love knowing you, and you've changed my life. Have I missed anything so far?
I think that's most of the things, right?
Yeah, yeah. And we are going to be together. So we've been together in person a handful of times over the years. We've usually done virtual stuff because she's now in Oregon as of like 4 years ago, I think.
5. Yeah.
5 years ago. So now we don't get to see each other as frequently, although when she was in Florida, she was on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast.
Yeah.
But we're both going to be in Atlanta at a summit next week. So if you're listening to this, it's the end of April. And then if you're in the Tampa Bay area, Alexis is coming to Tampa to do two different events. One of them is a channeling experience with Simon, May 1st. And then the other is a Meet the Author event that evening. I'll link to both. So if you're local and you listen to this, there will be links in the show notes to sign up, to register, or to get a ticket. And with you coming to Tampa, what I realized when I started to talk to some of my friends and my people here was that not everybody really knows what channeling is and has an understanding. I was trying to take myself back this morning to when I first started experiencing channeling with you. And the
Mhm.
first records I have of it are from 2021, but I don't remember how that conversation was initially. So I'd love to hear it from you of how would you describe channeling?
Oh, thanks for having me here, first of all. And you're amazing. And I love you very much. And I love all of the different hats. We've talked about this a lot. That's probably its own episode of all the different hats that we wear with each other. And it's not always easy to flow between all different ways. There are people who, if they're friends with somebody, they don't work with them, or if they work with someone, they don't become friends with them, or like all these different rules that people have. And I think we're both of the opinion that we're here to flow in our relationships and let them expand, which is funny because that's what the book's about, right? But it's beautiful how we've been able to do that. So yeah, channeling. Oh, it's such a big topic, and that's part of why it was so exciting to have this conversation. There's actually some really great resources out there. There's a wonderful whole series on Gaia on channeling. And interestingly, I agree with some of it, and some of it I feel like it's too broad. So some people explain channeling as any sort of material outside of your mind coming through. So some people will talk about channeling like psychic abilities or mediumship or those kinds of things. And for me, it's a little bit different. And the reason why I like to be more precise with my language is because I have a tendency to be more precise with my language in general. And that's really helpful. So we're really clear on what we're talking about. Because when we make it really broad, and I say I channel, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, me too. It's like, well, actually, this is a little bit different. So the language, I guess we're going all over the place. Really clearly for me, what channeling is a consciousness that is external to you, so separate from your own consciousness. So consciousness, some people could use the word soul or spirit or whatever that makes sense, whatever makes you fully you and not just your human self. So my consciousness is a lot more than just Alexis. It like encapsulates everything that I am, right? So whenever you interact with something outside of that, and it comes through your actual form, through the filter of your consciousness. And so I'm a psychic as well. I am a medium as well. All of these different ways of interacting with energy outside of us, I have a tendency to be good at. That's one of the things that is my gifts on this planet as this human being is I can interact with energy well, and I can interact with non-physical consciousness well and easeful. There's a lot of different ways to interact with non-physical consciousness. So sometimes we're talking about a former human, which a lot of times that's also talked about as mediumship. So I like to say former human because we're really clear on who we're talking to and what we're interacting with, right? So that's commonly going to be mediumship. I am of the opinion that it is much safer and a lot more effective as well to communicate with people who've passed, to conduct mediumship, to interact with former humans outside of one's body, outside of my form. And what that means is that you're interacting with the energy, with the consciousness, but you're talking with it, to it, kind of like you and I are, right? There's space between us. That's probably one of the best ways to put it. There's real clear differentiation. This can occur in your mind, for many people, for many psychics, for many mediums, there's this eye closing, there's this awareness, and it's a mind's eye sort of thing where you're interacting with this energy, and you're using your clairs, which are the non-physical, your spiritual part of your five senses, right? So you have claircognizance, which is clear knowing, clairsentience, clear feeling, clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, which is the one we hear about the most, and clairaudience is clear hearing. And yes, there's nuances to all of that, but let's just keep it simple with those. So people utilize those senses to interact with the unseen. So for some people, I've actually noticed with a lot of clients, and something that you and I worked with is that your main way you work with the world and the non-physical is not visual at all. And it's a little bit tricky for people. And because that's what we see in the movies, that's the loudest and we can trust it the most. And interestingly, the most common non-physical sense is clear knowing, where we have access and we have awareness of information, but we don't know how we know something. We just know it. And it's the easiest to just discount and say, no, I don't know what I'm talking about. That I made up, or I heard it somewhere else, or it's influenced by something else. But it's still a real thing. So we use those abilities to interact with energy, interact with consciousness. So if it's external to you, it's going to be psychic ability, psychic reading, because that was one of the questions, is what's the difference, in a psychic reading is being able to tap into the field of everything, and in a certain extent tapping into the field of the individual to be able to discern and relay and share information beyond what we consciously cognitively know. So when a psychic an intuitive, whatever word you want to use, is doing a reading, what they're doing is they're tapping into that person's energy. And for me, they're tapping into the most likely timeline possibility. What is the trajectory they're on? And this is where sometimes readings can go awry, because you get the information, but sometimes receiving the information will change your choices. And so then the reading feels like, oh, it wasn't that accurate. Why? Because something shifted. And sometimes that's the point. Sometimes we're drawn to get information so that we can make different choices. just like in regular human relating, we ask more questions about life, about a choice, about whatever, so that we can make a decision. And so the same is true with doing card readings or for yourself, or going to someone who has that sixth sense, that is more adept at understanding extrasensory perception, because that's really what's talking about. We're all able to access, interact with energy, and that's actually really heightening. And that's been happening for a long time, but it's accelerating in the last several years, that more people are awakening to this awareness and this ability to interact with the unseen. We live for millennia in this world that's very much the mundane, the physical, you have to see it to believe it sort of experience, and or experience it. And that's where we're having this expansion, where experience can occur with the non-physical. And that's how you know something is quote unquote real,
Mm.
because we know when we experience something, we can tell, we have this awareness.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a really good basic 3D level example to anchor something in.
Yeah.
Do you remember the movie Ghost from the 90s, 80s, 90s? Yeah. You remember when Whoopi Goldberg at the end lets Patrick Swayze's spirit through her? I felt like the differentiation between when she's communicating with the ghost, with the unseen, with somebody who was a human at one point and
Yeah.
is now in non-physical form. So mediumship, right? So she claimed to be, at the beginning, she was like joking and lying about it, like, I'm a medium, haha. And then she actually started to talk to people who had passed on. But then at the end, when he came into her form, I mean, it was a little bit of a Hollywood style thing, right? But that was not the same as connecting with an external. That was him coming through and talking through her.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so that was a really silly example that I was.
No, it's not silly at all. It's actually a really great example. I'm sometimes cautious of using that one because that's always on my mind as well, because it's someone who's passed. And it's really deeply not something that I recommend doing.
Mhm.
That's just my opinion. I know that there might be people out there that do that.
I see what you mean.
You can. It's
Right.
not something I recommend for a lot of different reasons. And a part of it has to do with the vibrational signature
Mm,
of what you're interacting with.
mm,
Um, and lower and higher doesn't mean good or bad. It doesn't mean better or worse. That's something sometimes feel, especially because as human beings, we discern things a lot that way. High is good, low is bad. But that's not at all what it is. And everyone's like, oh, we want to be high vibe, high vibe. Well, no, actually, you want to have a baseline day to day, always the most expansive, highest vibration you can, but your vibration is going to alter, and it's going to navigate itself through highs and lows, and there's not a good or a bad um,
mhm,
aspect of that. But truly, what vibration is talking about is how quickly particles move through. And
mhm,
so the higher vibration something is, the less density it has, which means the less physical it is. So, for example, we'll talk about Simon here in a little bit, but Simon is a non physical being, is a transdimensional being. And so, what that means is that he's able to move through different dimensions, and his consciousness can have awareness of itself in different dimensions all at the same time. Okay.
Okay.
So, that's why we use that word.
Keeping notes of some questions that I have. Do you want me to ask as I go?
Sure.
And I'm comfortable sharing some of my experience with how mediumship has come through channeling
Yeah.
with you and Simon. Because sometimes, I don't ask it often, but obviously in the last year since my mom passed, it's something I've talked about publicly already and it's talked about on the podcast. But there have been times when I ask about my mom and there is a bit of that mediumship, but you're not channeling my mom. That's not what's
Mhm.
happening. There's something that you can probably describe it better than what I would, but just to be clear, I understand what you're saying. You're not suggesting people channel non-physical, so yeah,
Mhm.
somebody who had passed before, but rather having a communication outside of you, which is what's happening with my mom, with you and Simon, right?
Mhm. Right. And so it's interesting when that's come up sometimes. And so I'm a medium outside of when I channel with Simon. But when I'm channeling with Simon, he does sometimes speak to people's loved ones. So that's essentially what's happening is he's having a conversation with them and then he relays it. Um, or he's tapping into the energy between a person who's passed and the subject who's asking the
Oh, I
question.
think on a separate non-channeling call one time, there was something coming in from my aunt as well at one point. So it was not during a channeling session. It was
Yeah.
just separate that we were having a different kind of call, that the mediumship stuff was happening and she was present for something.
Yeah, and that's, everyone's abilities are really different. At this point, I have a pretty high level of discernment and being able to open and close things. But what I've noticed will happen is if I'm comfortable and the person I'm with is comfortable and there's a desire from them to have information, it often will open up my ability to have information come through.
Okay.
Right. And so that's where it's like, oh, well, so and so's mom's here, or so and so's aunt is here, or whatever, which is always a really fascinating thing that happens. And it takes time. I think that some people in the beginning, if anyone's listening to this and is someone who's highly intuitive, who has a lot of abilities, perhaps, and aren't at the point where they're skilled, because lots of people can have lots of abilities, and the way that it reads is anxiety
Mm.
or it reads as other um, definitely not diagnosing anyone or saying that something is strictly always this, but there are things that are going to be under the mental health umbrella that are sometimes also or instead actually manifestation of abilities and a person being unskilled in those abilities. So
Mhm.
not knowing how to utilize their clairsenses, not knowing how to discern and have this um, boundary and barrier of like what can come in and what can't. When am I on? When am I off? When am I understanding information? When am I relaying stuff? When is it closed? All of those kinds of things. And what I really like, it's super important, is having the semi permeability. So what I've seen is a lot of people who are intuitive or who are noticing that they're very sensitive, they'll shut down completely and they'll create this barrier, this protection, this bubble that's solid and nothing can come through, meaning even source energy, even energy that is helpful and beneficial for them. So there's no flow. It's like it cuts off all the oxygen in the room in a spiritual metaphorical way, right? And that can have drastic effects, like people being exhausted. There's just a lot of things that can happen when you do that. So having the semi permeability of like, I don't want to interact with everything that's in my sphere, but I know that if something is of my highest expression, highest and most expansive experience, I'm going to have that come in. That makes
Mm.
sense.
I feel like I was closer on the side several years ago when we first met, where I was more blocked off, not in the extreme, but more blocked off. I think we talked about at one point, like I had put these sunglasses on in a way to just block out stuff because I wasn't ready for it. And there was a lot of rejection. But over time, I've been taking off the glasses and allowing more and more. So, question back to reading versus channeling. I've had at this point, what year are we in? 2025. So probably 7, 8 years of various types of readings. I started to think about it this morning. Like I've had numerology readings, not with you, other people, but
Yeah.
numerology. I had a face reading done one time by somebody we both know, and it was really amazing. I've had tons of tarot pulls. You've done Oracle tarot. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And I guess where I'm going is when you're channeling with Simon, sometimes I know you two work together. So there's a lot that Simon's giving you, but sometimes it's you, sometimes it's him. But to me, when you're not channeling, and not necessarily you, but other people that I've worked with who have given readings, I feel like what can be a little bit tricky, and maybe you can just shed some light on this, is their human energy and their experience interfering with it not necessarily being clean, squeaky clean transmission of a reading. So it's if you were doing, I won't say you, let's say this person over here is doing a reading for me, and she may have some difficulty clearing her own stuff from not being able to tune cleanly into me, which I found in the past can be a little tricky when it's
Yeah.
certain people doing readings.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about human beings who have opinions, who have lenses, who have a lifetime of experience. And who have belief systems, all these things of the way things are, or the best way to be a human, or the best way to do something, or the way the relationships are supposed to go, or an expectation of the way people behave, or any of those sorts of things. All of that is going to influence naturally, because it influences day to day when we interact, our whole life experience, and truly even beyond that. I mean, I talk about the spiritual soup, which is everything that you are, past, present, future, everything. Past lives, ancestry, the past lives of the ancestry of the past lives, the what is it called, different timelines within each experience and expression of yourself. I mean, there's just so much, right? And all of that informs how you interact moment to moment. When a friend asks you for advice, it's going to be from who you are and how you operate in the world. And what I feel is super important is, if you're doing a reading for a person, this isn't about your human opinion about something. And that is typically, there's layers of that. I would say the most part, um, that isn't something that's taught enough. That's why when you're intuitive, when you have these things, having really skilled mentors, learning a lot, like, it's really important to know, hey, I'm going to have my thoughts, I'm going to have my opinions. How do I shift that out and be as clean and open as possible so that I can really tap into this individual and what is their directionality, what is at the highest expression for them, right? And when you start adding in healing tools and abilities, it's also about helping open the possibility for them to stretch beyond where they're currently at. That's the part that's really important too, because if you're just getting a reading and there's nothing additionally, there's no purpose of healing, I almost feel like walk away. And because even a straight reading should have healing influence to it. And what that means is, a reading should give you something where you're either seeing your gaps or seeing the spaces where you can shift something, heal something. And what I mean by heal is a reconnection to wholeness, a remembrance of who you are, like on a universal level, in a oneness consciousness, expansion, love kind of thing. And when you tap into that, there's because part of being differentiated, and what that means is the idea, the concept that we're all part of God, source, universe, whatever you want to talk about, and that we individuate, that we come in to be these individual consciousnesses. And there's so many religions that actually talk about this. It's funny, because we had said we weren't going to go here, and here we are going here, that talk about the point and the purpose of incarnating, of experiencing, is, in Christianity, is the glory to God, right? In metaphysical kind of language, it's here where we differentiate so that source and all oneness can experience itself. At the end of the day, it's all the same thing, that we individuate so that consciousness can experience itself in each other. Right?
Yeah.
I lost a little bit where the beginning of our thought was there.
I mean, because I think talking about religion may have brought you, a little bit of that thing. I agree. I feel like, to me, it's just all the good stuff without all of the human, the strange human stuff that they've attached to religion.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is it does lead us back to that cleanliness of reading, which is what we were talking about, is that we all have opinions and thoughts and indoctrinations and belief systems and all of these things. And it's, where can we put that aside for a moment when we're choosing to interact with energy at the highest level to give a person advice? We were talking about healing. And yeah, truly what we're talking about with healing is this reconnection to remembrance of wholeness. We're whole the whole time, we just forget.
Oh, yeah, because with the readings, right? I mean, I've had some readings that do give a bit of expansion guidance, but a lot of time what you're experiencing from I talk about one in my book, and I don't call anybody out with names or anything, but it's very like this raspy New Yorker accent voice who's been a cigarette smoker her whole life, and she's super psychic. But it's just, here's some information. Good luck to you with your life, that kind of thing. And it's like, okay, yeah, she knows some stuff, but that's not very helpful on the path. And the difference in between that and when I've experienced channeling. Because I think back in 2021, I had no idea what we were doing at that time, what was going on. I just trusted because I knew you so well, and I
Yeah.
trusted, and yeah, and I had experienced, I don't even remember the first time I experienced channeling, but what I noticed early on was that it wasn't just, here's some stuff to know about yourself, carry on, but it was, to me, through my lens, like as a attendee of your
Mhm.
channeling sessions twice monthly for at least 3 years,
Yeah.
plus private quarterly. So that's my sign up lately. I've done this twice a month in a group setting, and I've done this quarterly for quite a long
Years.
time.
Mhm.
Um, Through my lens, it's, here's some information about what you're asking. And I've asked on and everything under the sun, from what seems to be the most basic stuff to stuff that's really complicated, nuanced stuff. And it's not just, here's the information and here's how to proceed. It's like a zoom out. Here's the
Yes.
bigger picture. Here's what's happening on an energetic level to explain and give you information. I love information. I'm a one line. And so to me, it's like the ultimate. It helps me see the things that I don't see when I'm navigating the stomach bug. Right? If I have the stomach bug, it's not just, okay, we all just have the stomach bug. Like, what's actually happening here? Or when I have the flu, or as my mom was passing, and I share quite a bit about Simon's interaction, and guidance in the book as I was preparing for that. And I feel like my relationship with you and Simon as an entity, right? Like, my relationship with you is separate. And then the guidance I get from the two of you together when you're channeling has evolved so much from those early, when I read back through, because I transcribe, I'm such a nerd. I transcribe the sessions because I need to absorb. When you channel with Simon, it's very poetic, and it's me, even now, I can't absorb it all in the moment. So I record it on, you keep recordings of those virtual sessions anyway, but when in person, I record on an audio app. I take my transcriptions, I keep it in a Google document, and I always go back and revisit. And I'm like, oh, I forgot about that piece. And it helps me to have information on such a deeper level to understand the things that can feel so confusing as a human, and you can feel so lost in so many departments. And that's why I enjoy it so much, because it's so hard to human. It's so hard to
It
understand why people are dying, or why your life is being rerouted. I've had these conversations with a couple of close friends very recently. When life is rerouting you in such a big way, it feels like the world is coming to an end in your walls. And remembering and having somebody who you trust, who I've learned to trust, I've grown to trust over the years, help you understand what's actually potentially happening for you, right? We know that this thing is happening, but then what's the potential that's coming for you? And what are ways that you choose these different things? It's also helpful for me in being a guiding voice to help me use my free will to make decisions that I choose or don't, and then I understand why I'm choosing the different things. I don't even know if that's a great way of explaining, but
That's amazing, especially that last piece, us under giving us an understanding of why we're even choosing what we're choosing. And it's a little bit like, wow, that sounds huge. And it is. And I think I really agree. I agree with everything you said. But one part that was particularly helpful, I think, is the zoom out idea. And that is very much what this is that you're talking about um, a being that doesn't reside in this earth, right? Like an energy that in its origin is very outside of our dimensional reality, meaning the consciousness is coming with wisdom that's outside of our humanness, which is really huge. And there's a lot of different channels and a lot of different beings that come to this earth and interact with humans to offer guidance in a different way. And all of them have their unique experiences. Many are collective consciousness. That's something to think about too. So, for example, a lot of people know of Esther and Abraham Hicks. I think ultimately what I've understood is that they were a we, is a more than one consciousness is Abraham, right? There's quite a few that it's the multi, right? And then you have like Bashar, for example, which is Daryl Anka. For those of you who know, who don't know, write them down. You can look these up as well. Different consciousnesses and also the channel themselves can resonate with you differently. But Bashar, it's interesting. Daryl Anka channels Bashar and has for years. I think I want to say like 40 years, possibly more than that. That it was in the 70s. I think he's been channeling with him, possibly 50. Anyway, in the beginning, our understanding and his understanding, Daryl's understanding what Bashar was a evolved life form from the future. And now his understanding is like, oh, wait a second. This is a future self of mine. This is a future life of mine, which is just really fascinating and beautiful. And of course, right? And I can imagine as the channel, I'm sure that he knew way before he gave that information publicly. And I'm sure it was a big question of debate of like, do we talk about this? Because it adds a different layer of it, right? And so there's all these pieces and sharing all that just to say there's so many beings in so many different ways that information that comes from a zoom out perspective comes through and we can see around us. We desperately need zoom out perspective. You know, we really, really need beyond where we're at. I mean, even Einstein said it like you can't solve the problems with the energy that created it. And that's really what we're talking about here is that particular, I think this is with many channeling, but I know for me, the way that I channel and I joke that I'm a monogamous channel because yes, I can channel with any being, but I only channel with Simon. And to kind of go back to the original question, which is what exactly is channeling? And channeling is, again, it's consciousness, it's information coming through the form. And so we can channel by writing. Sometimes you have, it's universal wisdom, it's oneness consciousness, it's, for some people it's God, it's whatever word you want to use. And it comes through you. You can feel this isn't outside your field; it's inside of your field, inside your cellular structure. It's through with our energetic anatomy, we have this line that goes through us, and it comes through that piece, right? And that's what channeling is. The method of allowing the information to come through then is interesting. So you can have automatic writing, which is often that's channeling, channeled writing. Sometimes people just get ideas and then they do something with it or they speak it. Now, there's a difference between a person receiving channeled information and saying, oh, this and this and this, and being in an altered state where the channel's consciousness is moving to the side. And so what is coming through is the channel rather than the individual translating what's coming through. So there's a difference. Everyone, the way that each individual runs their energy is different. This is why I'm very careful about the whole channeling piece of it all, is that I don't think everyone should just run out and start channeling and not knowing who's who or what's happening. Like this becomes akin to physical intimacy as well. Like most people, we're not running around just going to bed with everyone. We're having discernment of how we're sharing our bodies. Like, yes, energy, but let's talk about it like from a really mundane level. We have discernment of how we're sharing our bodies and the way in which we're interacting. I can have a dear friend and it doesn't mean I'm going to go and mount them, right? Like that if that's not the kind of exchange that I want to be having, like there's discernment around how I'm interacting. And the same is really, really true with energetic experience, with energy experience. It's what kind of relationship am I having with this entity, being, consciousness, energy? Like, how am I interacting with this? And that's where the energetic hygiene, like all these things come into place that are really important that we, don't have time to go into all that, but just to lay it out that these are the things that are really important. It's just not a matter of like, oh, I'm going to channel. So oftentimes for me, what I do is trance channeling, and that early on, So I first started working with Simon coming on 10 years ago. So it's been about 10 years. And for me, in the beginning, the information was coming through him just speaking with me to me. And then I started working with him with the expansion principle energy, which was channeled through and being able to move out the energy and work with my clients in my acupuncture office. It then shifted to we're going to attune people similar to Reiki, because expansion principle similar to Reiki, just Reiki is universal life force energy, specifically related to Earth and our human experience and our Earth experience, where the expansion principle doesn't come from this Earth, it doesn't come from this dimension. So it's different energy that can come in and shift things in a different way and can help us see and move and be the fullness of ourselves in a different capacity. So we then would attune people to this energy, which is matching to, which is allow them access to, raises their physical and cellular vibration to the level which they can interact with that energy. Okay. And to utilize that for healing, for all these things. Part of what happens when practitioners are attuned to EP is that they are opening up their abilities even more. So a person who said, oh, I don't have abilities, Nicole is a great example. And then now because her vibrational signature is higher, you're able to be open to the way in which you interact with energy, the way in which you interact with yourself. And then from there, that evolved into, I wrote the first book, which you share, The Expansion Principle, Healing for a New Earth, in January of 2020. And my publisher, as I was writing, I did a book writing, a week-long experience where I wrote the book in a week. And my publisher said, well, can't you just, channel like Abraham? I'm like, well, you know what? I probably could. Yeah. So I pressed play on a tape and I'm like, okay, so you're going to talk. And I just went deep into a meditative state, which I know how to do. And at that point, I already was a really experienced intuitive and really experienced medium and all of that kind of stuff. I knew how to interact with non-physical energies quite well. So I go deep into this meditative state and I just sort of gave this space. And in that, the next thing I know is he's speaking through my vocal cords and through, my mouth and through my voice. It's interesting is that when that occurs, when the channeling is happening, when he's borrowing my vessel, and I kind of hang out to the side, my face will change, my tone will change, my demeanor, all these things. There's slight nuances, but you can feel it and that something's different. It's interesting. My partner and I, before we got together, I did a channeling session for him and he came to a public channeling and he said, he's like, you could just tell like these things like that you just can't make that up. You just can't. That's what a lot of people will say, that there's little nuances where there's some kind of change happening. So yes, so I early on when that was the experience is like, how do I explain? Because I'm hearing, so and so over here talk about how they're channeling, and what they meant was they got a great idea for a program, or they got a great idea for their life, and that's like, oh, I channeled this. It's like, okay, yes, it's quite possible, but we don't have to use that word to make what we know and what we want to create special. And I think that I see that sometimes is that it's used to make something special. And it's like, well, everything's special. Everything is beautiful and unique when it comes from our expression, and co-creating with source, co-creating with the divine is something we ought to all be aiming for. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think that this is where that language is important. And I think, if people want to call it channeling, that's fine. But it's important to discern what level, because that I can tell you for sure is not the same thing you would experience when you come to one of the channeling sessions that I do, right? It's just a different thing. So So then the trans, like, well, how do I differentiate? And I started doing research and just like, I'm like, I think this is the closest to trance channeling, because I'm going into meditative state. I'm coming to the side. He's speaking. These are the words that are going to, for people who know, this will make the most sense. And for people who don't, they'll be like, oh, okay, I wonder what that is. How is this different than, oh, I channeled this. And within the online space of business and all that, that's something we commonly heard, especially several years ago. It's like, oh, this is a channeled program, and it's like, right? And it's, again, it's not to make it any less important, because that's beautiful. And if you were able to put your mind to the side and let something drop in, that's gorgeous and really important and really impactful. There's different ways that we channel and different ways that we tune into non-physical information. Um, which I've played with teaching for a long time, but that's another topic.
Well, a little bit of not an invitation, something for you to respond to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's where we landed with the trance channeling, that's what that is that he comes hang out.
Yeah.
And this is part of why, like, I don't really do that. I don't know that I'll ever let another being speak through my form, because it's not necessary. It's not necessary. And that's where with spiritual things and non-physical and energy and all that, is like, what is necessary? And to be honest, like, I didn't get here just be like, oh, I want to do this cool thing. Like, this was a really long, arduous process that has affected my physical body. It's affected the way my brain functions, all of these things, because you can't possibly interact with an energy that has such a high vibration to the point where it does not have a form, because its vibration is so high. And to be able to bring that in on any level, and to be able to filter that out, to transmute it, to translate it, to all these changes. And I think that that's something of note too, is like, with our spiritual evolution, there's physical and cellular changes that are occurring in our bodies. There's new neural pathways that are created. And for a lot of people who channel the way that I do, or doing work at the level that I'm doing, there's a lot of that neural pathway changes that are happening. So for me, I mean, that started out as what looks like a seizure. And really fascinating is that a traditional seizure, people don't have any connection with what their consciousness is doing. It just, you're out of it. You shut down that part. What's fascinating is, I know how my consciousness is really adept at navigating my experience. And so, when I first started, it really was when I was bringing EP through and we were going to start the practitioner training, that it was this full shaking. And I'm sharing this because this is something that some people do experience and they don't know what's going on. And it's my hope, my desire long-term to work with, a neurologist and study these things. And because there's so much more. And I think that there's quite a decent section of the population of people who experience neurological conditions, that there are spiritual things that are going on, and that there's a lot more to the story than just a biological dysfunction, because sometimes there isn't a biological dysfunction per se. It's actually the body having to have an experience in order to match up with the spiritual aspect of it, the non-physical, the energy aspect of it.
I mean, I was thinking about something you said earlier. We can't make that up in terms of what your partner reflected to you, but I'm sure others have as well.
Yeah.
Your appearance, your voice, the things changing when you are in a channeling state. And I think that it's not just in how you appear, it's also in the messages that come through. I mean, over time,
Yeah.
I've gotten deeper and deeper. And as I've told you before, it's like Simon really knows what I'm open to being shared with me when we're in a group setting versus what I'm open to being shared in a private setting. And so the answers I get sometimes are just a little bit different when we're in the groups, which I think is important for people to know, because if people are attending an in-person channeling experience with you and have this thing that's heavy on their heart, but they're afraid to get too much information in front of everybody, it's never that. You're never being called out in an uncomfortable way. You're not being exposed that somebody's coming in and saying, you're this awful human, you've done all these bad things, and this is why you're suffering, or whatever, right? Because I mean, I think I haven't I don't know, let me think about how to say that part. That specific fear wasn't mine, but I know it was somebody's who I know of was really hesitant to come into the channeling experience, not because they didn't believe in it, but because they were afraid of what would be told. And it's
What
never
will
I've
be
never said
revealed, right? What will be revealed of me? And there's never that. There's
yeah.
never that. There's this beautiful privacy. And with what you were saying, like you can't make it up, and like that discernment between who I am and who Simon is really fascinating because I'm brilliant. I mean, I'm an intelligent person. I know a lot of things. I have a way of being able to relay information. I have a healing presence, all these beautiful things that are true.
Yeah.
And also, that's something else.
Yeah.
The way that he delivers messages, information, and even to me sometimes, which I'm very, I don't always do that publicly too much, but on occasion you'll hear people ask questions for me and I let that come through. But the way that he speaks is just unique. And there is this poetry again, because language has energy component. And there's something that's shifting within us, and that these experiences are very healing experiences. The words that are spoken, the energy that is coming through me and outward to people, whether it's directed to you or everyone else in the room, or you're even watching a recording on, whether it's in the Bardo Pass or in the YouTube channel, wherever you're listening to something that wasn't even for you, and something's touching you and something's shifting for you. That's really significant. And I think that that's where all spiritual experiences we should really be aiming for, is it adding to us? Is it adding for me? Is it giving me something? And these do that. And that's where I find these to be a little bit different than, or quite a lot different from a reading, where there needs to be this space sometimes when you do this reading. It's like, okay, now I need to just absorb this. And sometimes I'll have people who want to use that same way with the channel message. It's like, well, I did one, so I'll wait 6 months or I'll wait a year or whatever. And it's like, this is really different, because what you said about him always knowing how to say something and in what, given the environment and given the audience around you or with you or whatever, but it's also the piece of where you personally are at too. That he's not going to give you more information than where you are. Meaning, 2 weeks from now, you would have taken that in, something shifted, and now you're ready for the next piece, and then you're ready for the next piece, and then you're ready for the next piece. And then I think that that's why many people who come into like our ongoing, Bardo is our ongoing twice a month experience online that's closed and private. And people come in and they stay for years. Why? It's not because there's this addiction to information, which sometimes happens. Sometimes people can get addicted to getting readings. But a lot of times I feel like that comes from an unsatiated desire versus, oh, that feels good. And this just helps me move forward more, and it helps me move forward more, and it helps me move forward more, where I have this beautiful support of beyond my mind. And the idea is that anything that's truly supportive is going to calm you and center you rather than make you nervous and make you uncomfortable and unsettled. And there's never any information where people walk away unsettled. It's always, okay, how does this move? How does this shift? And really letting it percolate within you and move things and heal things within your soup, meaning, so much, right? Like
Well, I have an example for you if you want to tie it in that I'm comfortable sharing. So I'm comfortable sharing this one. So a lot of what I ask Simon is really intimate, and I save the most intimate questions for private sessions when I do those. But the things that I'm comfortable in the group, an example is I have asked a lot about my business stuff over the years. And let's say a year and almost, let's say a year and a half ago, I was like, what is happening with my business? New Year's is coming and I don't feel any urge. At the end of 2023, I could not make myself plan anything for my business. But Simon never said, hey, yeah, this is actually happening because in the X number of months, you're, preparing
Yeah.
for this really big experience, because I wasn't ready. I wasn't there. And if I would have heard, like, it just wasn't even a thing, but those ongoing conversations helped me move forward in the business, trusting that I was clearing my books and not putting anything else on my books. And I'm like, what is happening? Why am I not filling up my calendar right now. I just couldn't make myself do it. In a past me would have made myself do it and created a lot of unnecessary spinning my wheels. But now I was like, you know what?
Or
I'm
a mess to clean up. I mean, what
or
would happen if you actively had, like, let's say you had run a mastermind and people had come in? I mean, your work's amazing. Of course people would, right? And so now you have 10 people in a mastermind and your mom's just passed.
It
And
was
so
such a
you
mind screw. It was such a mind screw because in the moment you're like, what am I supposed to do? Not run my business?
yeah.
But I'm getting just enough information to move forward. And then as things progress, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's no way. I mean, it would have been really clunky for me to have to unwind all that while prepping to help my mom pass. Like I was being prepared to help her pass, and I had no idea. So consistently going and attending, and it was helping me move forward, not freaking out about the business stuff, but trusting everything that was happening. And then there's a lot of these moments in different categories of life where you're like, oh, okay, that's why. And yes, that's a one of those moments. So for people who watch or listen to this, I mean, as a consumer, like on the consumer client side of this, I've had a really profound experience with you and a really incredible experience with the both of you when you're together as well. It's both. And if you can make it to an in person, if you're Tampa based and you can make it to a Tampa, I highly, highly recommend coming. It's May 1st. And if you're not, I mean, Alexis and Simon did these virtually as well. And
And
we'll
we'll
share
do
those.
them all over. We will continue to have, it's a beautiful thing about podcasts, right? It's going to be on there forever. So yeah, I mean, the channeling events in person, it's something I do locally in my area. And we go to the coast and we go up and down, into California and into, our area. And the idea is to do these all over, and so there might be a day when we come to a city near you, whoever you are, wherever you are. And there is something really potent about having the in-person. I don't think you've had an in-person experience yet, Nicole, have you?
I did in Oregon last year.
Oh, fun.
But
Okay.
I don't remember if it was just me talking and asking questions or if it was the group stuff that we were doing.
Yeah, I don't
But I
remember.
was there I was there for some in person, but that was my only time like that. So I'm really excited. And also you started sharing clips from some of your in-person channeling stuff to your social media. So I'd recommend people check that out as well to get a feel for what
Yeah,
this looks like. And obviously those 10, there's no names and it's not super personal, intimate things. And then if you are my friend, we can unpack it together. So outside, it's something I really like doing with one of my good friends who has attended Bardo is we will unpack them
yeah,
together in human language and really break it down like, okay, let's figure this out. I'm glad that you came and shared. I learned a little bit as well because like I've been attending for so long, but there's some of this that I had never really asked outright. And
yeah.
I feel like we've done a good job at the basics of what we wanted to cover. If there's anything else you feel like you'd like to share with anybody before our time is up.
Oh, I just want to invite people that when they're curious about something, when something comes into their sphere, it's often because you're being asked to move forward into something that it is for you. I think that's in my work. I've noticed most commonly people are like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready, or am I worthy of that, or can I do that? Or it's like, well, if it's coming into your sphere and you have curiosity, move forward. There's a reason why things are in front of us.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. There was a couple things that I wanted to bring up before we go. If anybody's like, well, I don't even know what I would ask, because this is something I've been talking to a friend who's coming next week, and she's like, I don't really know what to ask. And I can tell you, I mean, Alexis has seen every question. I've asked on anything from business and big picture life guidance to relationship guidance to I always will be asking about stuff that my kids have going on, what's coming up for them, but what's the bigger picture? What can I do with this? A lot of times as an EP practitioner, as somebody who didn't come into EP training, expansion principle training with a history of healing and all of that, as somebody relatively new to that field and new just to energy healing and not knowing all the ways of using it, a lot of times my questions are, how can I specifically use EP on this thing, that this very unique thing that's coming up for my kids or a friend or a client? But you can ask anything. And then I also suggest, as you would know if you attend like the virtual stuff, but then in person, is if there's something that's coming up, Alexis usually, well, always does a great job at helping you word your question in such a way that you'll have the most expansive response.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have enough time to do all that at the events. I usually try to, whether it's the Tampa ones or anywhere, we usually try to have that time. And when there are local events, I have someone facilitate with me. My best friend Andy Black, she usually does that, and we just always will ask and talk it out and figure out what are the questions. And what we recommend people all the time is, if you really don't know, you can just ask general and it'll still be important. And then what I've noticed is one of two things will happen with a general the first time. One, you'll understand, and then he'll ask you questions, and then there'll be like a bit of a dialogue and you expand out, right? The other thing is sometimes he'll answer, and sometimes people aren't 100% ready for what he's saying. And I think for those people, it takes some time to percolate what that message is and not fully understand. But then we'll unpack it afterward, and they'll be like, oh, or they'll be with someone and they're afterwards, they're like, so this and this and this and this. Oh, and this reminds me really quickly, I would like to say there was the coolest session we had once, an in-person session. It was winter time in Oregon, so we're all covered up. And Simon was getting really excited answering a person's question. And I think it was a general message. And he's going on and on about the rainbow unicorn. And I remember, so for me, it's a little bit like I'm sitting on the couch next to him while he talks to people. I'm like, dude, come on. Are you serious right now? Like tone it down. Like we're done with the rainbow unicorn. Let's move on. But he was so excited and just going on and on about it. And I had my eyes closed. So I didn't know what was happening. Andy was looking down, writing notes. So neither one of us were aware because she would have brought my attention to it. And the woman he was speaking to had revealed something to everyone and they saw it. But at the end, she brought it up. The woman had a giant rainbow unicorn on her arm. So to me, I was like, why are you going on about this energy? Like, why? Because he was talking about the healing she has access to and the horn and the way it works and the way that you can interact with the unicorn energy and the rainbow and the horn, the whole thing, right? And here this woman, this is a really significant thing. This is like legit. She has a giant rainbow unicorn. I mean, and I believe this work. And for anyone who is intuitive, who channels, who does mediumship, who does whatever, or is just maybe in the closet still with their abilities, it's real. It's real. And so there's a whole process of that you go through. But that I love stories like that because it just blows you away. And there's so many stories like that. So
I
anyway,
mean, look at last week when we had the session about my book. I'm going to plug it really quickly because, of
please
course,
do.
I was asking about, I've been checking in throughout the year since my mom passed, because really soon after she passed, I knew that the information came of like, I'm going to write a book. Okay, I'm going to write a book about this. That's
Yeah.
what's going to happen. And there was a lot that led to that. But when I asked for some book guidance recently, he shared, and this is something I don't even know, I don't remember if I told Alexis or not, but regardless, early on after I knew about the book, I just saw the book, and I'm not usually clairvoyant, not usually a seer in that way, not that way. As a projector, I'm a seer, but that's a different kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But I saw the book and I saw the cover, and it was a collage of photos of us. And it was like a muted, kind of softened photo collage. And then there was something at the front that draws your attention, the title, Walking Mom Home. And I was like, oh, okay, that's the book. And that was something that Simon brought up at one of our recent Bardo sessions, where he said, he was talking about the photo collages and the books. The cover. And I was like, of course. And that was also, my mom came in and was like, tell her to bring in the fairies. She basically told him, make sure she includes the fairies. And it's hilarious if you know me and you've ever seen what I've talked about and my mom's influence on the girls with the fairies. Like, we have a full-on fairy garden. It was really, and those kinds of things do happen regularly. And yeah, so thank you. And Simon, of course, for all the work that you do for me and for all of us, really.
It's our pleasure. Yeah, it's funny because for anyone that can watch the video part of this, I've been yawning a lot, particularly probably in the last 15 minutes. That's him trying to come through. So yes, we're both honored to be here and to do all the things and to help. And it's beautiful that more and more people are interested in augmenting their human experience and their path and their trajectory and changing, playing a part in changing the energy on this planet because it's really important. And that's why we're here. That's why I allow myself to channel. Like that's the whole point. I said a little bit ago about, is it necessary? Oh, and that was why I even shared the story of the shaking of the seizures, is that I always ask, am I safe? And is this necessary? That has always been my experience for anything that I'm going through. And even with this, with channeling, like, am I safe with the channeling? Yes. Is this necessary? Yes, because this is how we both get to work together here at this time in this way. So, so we'd love to see you. We'd love to see people in person. It's something special.
Me too. I'm really excited. I just need to sleep as much as possible between now and then.
Yes, you do, because you're going to be hitting it hard.
Keep up with my generator friend.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And I will share all the things for all the ways that people can connect and stay in touch. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
Yep.
Okay. Bye.